we're going to get started. And can I just say, kudos to everyone for ignoring the talk in the other room on earning six figures while you sleep. I love the dedication to the nerd room that's over here, so that's good.
Yeah, come on.
All the true nerds represent in here. So, well, I would like to welcome you to Matt and his talk. So he's the founder and coding wizard behind MRKWP, which does not stand for...
No, it's website professional.
Website professional, right? Okay, it's very important to clarify. So he loves being knee-deep in code, creating top-notch WordPress websites with custom plugins and themes for clients. And apart from that, he shares a lot of wisdom on YouTube, which I am going to check out afterwards. I haven't had a chance yet, but I love nerdy videos on YouTube, so yeah. I'm going to be there. And so he once sold a website for a cool $1 million, which is pretty good, which today is 2.5 million. No.
It actually would be, yeah.
And yeah, that's it. And he's an avid golfer, apart from this as well. And you have a handicap of?
17 at the moment.
17. I don't know if that's good. I've got no idea if that's good.
It's all right. It's all right.
But I'm very keen on his talk today. I'm in the same place as being a PHP dev from a long time back and understand how this, the new block editor and everything React shifted everything. And his aim today is to get you not just to learn something, but to be empowered to do it yourself afterwards. Yeah. So that's what we're about.
That's right. Yeah.
Get into it.
Thank you.
Big hand for Matt.
Thank you very much. I'm going to switch between glasses and not glasses. It's a bit darker up here, so just so you know when I'm doing that, I'm just making sure I've got things in focus. So how did I go from a shortcode guy doing PHP to React? That's a big question. And, we probably all remember this 2015, the other Matt from WordPress, who you may be aware of, said, learn JavaScript deeply. And you know what I did? Stuck my head in the sand, said, no, I'm not doing that. I didn't even think about learning React or anything. I really did a stick my head in the sand moment. And that wasn't a good idea. So to give you a bit of background, I started coding when I was around 7 on a VIC-20 computer. That was before the Commodore 64 with GW Basic. Very fortunate that my dad put that keyboard in front of me at a young age. And that means that I'm one of those fortunate people that can't remember not knowing how to type. And to be a man in his 40s and not having to remember that, that's pretty good, because it means I'm quite comfortable in front of a computer. And I went from being in PHP to learning React. There's a couple of aha moments. So today we're going to go over these main 3 points. First of all, why do we need to know React? What do we need to really know about this whole thing? You don't have to know everything about everything, but what do you need to know that's going to help you in WordPress? Understanding a bit about dynamic blocks, and we're going to look at some code samples, or I've actually got local, and we're going to look at some code and get into the weeds a little bit. And finally, I'm going to finish with a few tips and some URLs. So let's go straight into it and talk about why React and why blocks. So just before I go much further, who here has actually made a shortcode in code before or made a plugin or something? Excellent. And who here has used like npm and installed Node or something? Yep, there's a few of you there as well. Great. And who here has actually built a block, a native block? Okay, so there's a few of you here. Excellent. Well, I'm sure you're still going to learn a couple of handy tips, and the good thing is you've got plenty of code. So my samples today go from, making your first dynamic block to making something that's extending an existing function in WordPress, all the way to how I use a PSR4 autoloader and put that to load things up on top of shortcodes from other plugins. And we're going to look at how I did that for rank math. So, first of all, shortcodes. We all loved them. It was a wonderful introduction for me all those years ago. 2015, there was a heck of a lot of shortcodes inside plugins. We even had things like Divi, that the whole thing was just shortcodes, right? All these different shortcodes, but it was putting something over the top. And if we think about it, that's what I'm going to be teaching you today, but we're just going to be using the block editor over the top of this kind of dynamic code. So shortcodes were great because I could make a little snippet of PHP, put the shortcode in, and bang, here's something dynamic when I view it. But it also had a major failing. That is, in the editor, it just says shortcode. You don't actually know what it's going to produce. Until you view it, you don't really know. And that means that unless you push the publish button, you're quite often not getting the proper output. So then, of course, we came up with the block editor. And we all know how that's been a bit of a journey for WordPress. Some people love it, some people hate it. But at the end of the day, for quite a lot of people, once they get used to it, the block editor has a lot of advantages, particularly when it comes to integrations. I really like the fact that I can use Yoast and Rank Math and SEMrush to give me feedback on what my actual content's like for SEO. It's got lots of great integrations, it's native, and it also runs quite fast. So all of this runs with React, and this is really where things start to get a bit tricky for a lot of us. React is very different than PHP. The way we build things is a significantly big change in the way we think about code. And for me, that was pretty hard. So right now we have this huge technology stack. Gaining React wasn't just React really, because we've got our PHP, we've got React, we've got JavaScript, we've got TypeScript in there now. We have CSS, SCSS, MySQL, caching tools, the NPM tools, NPX. It seems like we've got so many acronyms, it's like, hey, how many of these things am I going to have to deal with? But you don't have to know everything about every technology. There's certain parts of this tech that's really going to help you. So today, we're really looking primarily at dynamic blocks. As a PHP coder, you're going to want to use dynamic blocks because the output of the block is handled by PHP, not by JavaScript. And that takes just one layer of complexity out of things, and it's a great place to start as a PHP coder. So whenever we start with anything, we use the npm and a thing called create block. All right, so your first command is going to be doing that. I've put a URL there. If you want to go to mrkwp.com/WC Sydney, I'll put the URL up later as well. I've got all links there to repos and stuff like that I'm going to be showing today. But we pretty much run this little command, npx WordPress create block, latest, and I did WP multi-block from that tutorial. At that point, the code gets created for a whole plugin. It generates all the JavaScript, all the building, everything, hopefully. Because sometimes, you get more than just this kind of output. You end up with a whole page of output and something goes wrong, and that can get a bit painful. We're not going to go into troubleshooting NPM today, but if you want to reach out to me or other people in the community, or use the WP Australia Slack, there's plenty of people willing to help you. And the other thing that really does help is the local tool from WP Local. And that has, NPM and a lot of things already pre-installed. So that'll really help you out. So what did this thing really do? Well, first of all, it's created a whole bunch of scaffolding. So from here, we're going to jump over to my other computer and we're going to start looking. Okay, we've ran a command in the command line. It's created code. What did we get? So switch over. All right. Success. Okay, it worked. So let's take a look at VS Code. So this repo will be available on that URL that I mentioned. So here, when we look at this, can you guys see that? Or do I need to make it bigger? Or they're all good? Everyone's good. Okay. So in here, we've got WP multi-block. This WP multi-block up here, that's the plugin that was created by that command. Within here, again, following that tutorial, I've got block 1 and block 2. These are inside the build folder. So that's what we call our compiled build of our code. So let's take a look at block 2. This is our dynamic block. And we've got a block JSON here. And I put a couple of attributes in this today. Block JSON is a way where we describe attributes for our block. In here, we've got variables. Now, let's think about shortcodes. Remember when we used to have a shortcode and you'd send through what? Attributes. So when inside the square brackets, if you ever sent any variable over, it was called an attribute. Well, blocks have the same thing. These are the attributes. These are the values that I'm going to store within this block and make use of. So here we've got an example number, an example text, an example boolean, and a thing called show debug. 4 variables inside block JSON. By doing this, we have registered and told WordPress that we're using these 4 fields, okay? We can see what they are, the number, the string, and 2 booleans there. From there, we need to do something with that. And inside our editing interface, we're going to use a file called edit.js. Edit.js is what's actually shown to the end user when they're in the editor, all right? Edit.js. So let's take a look at our WordPress. So here I've installed my multi-block. It's activated. This is the same WordPress install. And I have Query Monitor. Is everyone here familiar with Query Monitor? So Query Monitor is a tool that just outputs different debugging information visually for me, okay? It's a really handy tool and the logging within it is fantastic. And we're going to show you how to use that little debug boolean, a true and false flag, to output my attributes into Query Monitor. Am I losing anyone yet? Good. Okay. So here we've got my test block. And if I look at this block and I click it, let's have a look at the sidebar here with the block settings. And I have example text. Remember where we saw that? Example text was in block JSON. Example number, that was in block JSON as well. My example boolean, and I've got show debug in QM down here, Query Monitor, as enabled, okay? So let's go back to our code so we make sure we can understand this. So what were we looking at the side? We're looking at a text controller, and I've imported these up the top here inside my code. So I imported these parameters, and then down here, we've got these attributes and set attributes. These are two sort of values within React. The first one is saying, let's get the attributes and let's have a setter to set the attributes inside React so we can maintain the state of these values inside the block editor. All right, so that's up the top. Then we set what we call constants. These are just values to hold my attributes. And again, you'll notice we've got the same repeating pattern. Can you see that? Example number, example text, example boolean, and show debug. And these are all part of attributes. As we scroll down, we've got block settings for our panel body, and see how this is inside the inspector controls. That's the sidebar. So let's tab back. Here, we've got the block settings. This is the inspector controls right here. That's what I'm describing inside React here. You'll notice these tags are very much like HTML components. It's like having a paragraph tag, a heading tag, or a form tag, but these are React components. And I've got my inspector control there, and I've said in the panel body, the body of this panel, I've put in my sidebar, I want a couple of values. In my text control, I want my example text. And I've got my on change, example text, set attributes, example text. Next up, I've got another field set with a text control of the example number. And then I go further down, I've got my example boolean with a toggle control there. So see how the control changed? And then finally my show debug. And then all I do is just output, in this particular case, hello from the editor. So when we were inside the editor page, you can see here it says block 2, hello from the editor. Okay, yours won't look completely like that because I get a little bit kind of funny with my PHP CS. I just have to fix the errors. So this outputted a couple of issues, so I put a PHP CS sniffer in there and stuff and fixed them. But you can get that code, all right? So remember, all this code is open source. You'll be able to grab this code and run it yourself and just do a git pull. So we've got all of this, but what does it actually do? Well, when we go to the test block and we look at it, I've published this page, saved it, and when I go to logs, I've outputted this here. So see, again, we've got the same values, look. Show debug, example number, example text, and my example boolean. Because I haven't set the boolean, it's empty, okay? So it's just completely empty because I didn't turn it on. If I switch that toggle, it'll get populated. So if I go back to here and change the example number to 2, and we'll say text here, like so, and we push save. That was a risky moment. It's the moment where everything could have gone wrong, but we're okay. And then we'll push refresh, and I've got Query Monitor up here. This is what's displayed these numbers up here, and I've got a log that's showing this. But where did this come from? Where did this come from? Well, this has come from a thing called render.php. So inside our block, we have this render.php file right here. And this looks pretty simple, doesn't it? I mean, all I've done is taken my tip from yesterday's, make sure you hash everything and use security properly. And we've got our echo out the block wrapper attributes. So these are default attributes for a block. Things like alignment and stuff like that. You know, when you put a block in, you get your little block ribbon up the top. All those attributes get stuffed inside of there. I've got my hello from a dynamic block up the top with my HTML, and then I've got an if set attributes. So if my attributes exist, and if my attributes show debug exists, because remember with the Booleans, they're either present or not present. They're not zeros and ones. They're not automatically set a value. So if it's present, if I have the show debug do action, which is from query monitor, do my query monitor debug and give me all the attributes out in the log. And that's what we have. Let's take a look there. There it is. That's what we're seeing. There's my array, there's my debug, all coming from a closure, and we can see some of the detail there if we want to follow that. So this is a dynamic block. And what we've been able to do with this, and as soon as I got this moment, I realized, hey, I can put something in a block and send it to PHP. That's an amazing moment for most of us. Because all of a sudden, what I used to do with shortcodes, I can now do inside the block editor. And once I started to do that, I realized, hey, there's lots of different patterns and different things I can do here. Has anybody here been familiar with the PHP command do shortcode? Yeah, we use that all the time. Well, inside that render.php, on this line here, I could do it, do shortcode, and the shortcode would happen. I can put that anywhere inside this file, any PHP I want, with any of those values from those attributes, and output it, and it will show up in the block editor and be used. To me, that was an aha moment, because all of a sudden, I stopped trying to wrestle with this static block kind of thing, trying to get React to output this HTML, and I could go back to my happy place of PHP. And that was a big, big moment, because then all of a sudden, we started to build all sorts of different plugins as a team. So we're going to take a quick look at another plugin that I've built. And this is just going to be a bit of a rundown from the WP list category block. Now, I've done a YouTube video on this. You'll be able to find it on my YouTube channel where I went through this block. This code is available. You can go to the URL. It'll also be inside the blog post that I'll share with you later. The beautiful thing about this is I used an extraction of the WP list categories function inside WordPress. So inside WordPress, we have our blog, and we have a list of categories available for every blog post, don't we? You can turn them on. Some people, we all have clients. Anyone got a client that thinks tagging in WordPress is a bit like tagging on Instagram? You know what I mean? Yeah, we've all had some of those, don't we? We end up with 500 tags and 500 pages. Well, you know, the same with the list categories, really. And this function, what it does is simply outputs a list of categories. So let's go through this plugin. First of all, we've got just a bit of a loader here. And all that does is really simply register my single block in the build folder, and that's it. That's all it does. Real simple index file, isn't it? You can just see I've registered a block and called it on initialization. So let's take a look inside this source folder. So we're going to look in the source because source is rendered to build for here, okay? So we're going to take a look inside of there. And inside of here, on the block JSON, you'll notice we've got a slightly bigger list of attributes there. So here I've got a few more attributes. But why this is really handy for all of you guys, and was handy for me, is because WP list categories on the WordPress site, these attributes are named exactly the same as the attributes for the function. You get it? So I've got a function that takes these named attributes into it, and I can just pass it straight over. So I've got my editor where all the fields are, okay, so it looks exactly like the other one with the inspector controls, but inside render PHP, some magic starts to happen. Well, what I consider magic, for you guys it's probably real simple, but for my small mind, this was a magic moment. Because all I've done here is said to WP list categories, take the attributes. And because I named everything the same as that function inside block.json, I named them the same inside edit.js and just pass them to render.php. Those attributes are all named the same. Now, if I edit it inside the block editor, the attributes are passed to the function and it outputs exactly what I want. Isn't that amazing? Well, I thought it was. I hope I'm not boring you too much and you're all awake. But really, take a good look at this, because once you know this, you could say, hey, you know what? I'm going to copy this repo of Matt's and I'm going to use it for a different function. And that function I'm going to use can be anything, and as long as you name your attributes the same as what it's receiving, set the fields up in block.json and just copy and paste my pattern in the edit.js, you push build, any function you want becomes a block. Any PHP function, and it just has to receive attributes. To me, as soon as we started doing that, all of a sudden, we started making all sorts of different plugins as a team with blocks in the block editor. And now, I've started to get a bit addicted to this. So now whenever I get anything, I end up building all sorts of different add-ons. So here we've got another repo. This is one for rank math. Anyone here a rank math user or aware of what it is? Yeah, a few of you, okay. So rank math has been around for a bit of time, and that means within their plugin, they've got shortcodes. All right, now those shortcodes, you can use them in the block editor, but you don't know what you're really going to get, right? You can still put shortcodes in the block editor with the shortcode block. You can often mix them in with text and they work, but I wanted to take that breadcrumb and put what I call the veneer over the top, the block editor veneer. All right, if you think about what's a veneer is a covering of another type of wood. That's where we know from construction. All right, so this table has a black veneer. Underneath, we don't know what material it is. It's not black all the way through, right? It's got a veneer over the top, a protection layer, a layer between what it really is. Here, we're building a veneer. A React veneer inside the block editor. That's a layer that then passes everything through to the real action, the PHP that makes everything happen. Does that make sense? All right, so here we've got this, and this is using kind of a little bit more complicated loader because I've used an auto loader pattern. So you might want to dig into this. I've got some videos on this about PSR4, Composer, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. We'll be here for 2 hours. But really all you need to know here is I've got this block, rank math here for breadcrumb, and I've just registered my block here. And instead of having render.php, I've replaced it with a class. All right, and this means that because I've got a final class, I've got hooks. If somebody decided to have my plugin installed and someone wanted to unregister this hook, for example, for a specific page or purpose, they could do that because there's a central registry of hooks. We won't go too far down that rabbit hole, like I said. But the main thing is you can see here, I've got this output. And the output is do shortcode, and if that happens to be empty, it just says no breadcrumb, otherwise it returns the output. So this is just doing that do shortcode that we're talking about, okay, that familiar bit of code. So I'm registering my breadcrumb block, and this one I've registered the render callback just there. And that callback says go to this class. Let me zoom that up a little bit, eh? That looks a bit better. Yeah, that's better, isn't it? So here, render callback, there, that talks to that. And now that particular block, still inside the block folder here. My block JSON for this has no attributes at all. I didn't put any in there. It was just a simple way for me to get that shortcode out, put it on the page, and there's no render file there. Why? Because I've directed it to my function, and that's why I wanted to include this here. Sometimes you don't want to use render.php. You want to talk to some other kind of class somewhere and register a custom function for the callback itself of your block. Yeah, does that make sense? Everyone stayed with me? That's pretty cool. I kind of expected a few more nods and things like that, but I do understand it's Sunday morning, and many of you were punishing your brains last night, I'm sure. But yeah, I wasn't, so I'm all fresh and sparky. All right. I didn't force you to have anything. I didn't force you. All right, so let's just finish up. A couple of block tips as we go through here, and then I'm going to go into questions, because I think that's really where I might be able to point you to some of the answers in the code for anyone that's getting confused, and I can point you to where you might be able to connect with me later or with one another to learn more. Righty, okay, we got there. So, important thing for static blocks. So when you get to static blocks, every attribute must be saved in your HTML in some form. So unlike the PHP stuff today, we haven't had to deal with where is that value stored. Notice how we didn't have to deal with, hey, where did this attribute actually go in the database? With a dynamic block, you don't have to worry about it. It's magic behind the scenes, okay? But when it comes to static blocks, you do. So that was a big thing. So as soon as you move from a dynamic block to a static block, just remember that. And by all means, reach out to me if you want any tips and some examples on that kind of stuff. I'm happy to share them, and I will be doing some videos later this year on my channel, so you can feel free to subscribe there. When it comes to resources, there is some great resources. On the blog article that I have here, mrkwp.com/WC Sydney, there's a list of links there, okay? So you can go to that. It's also, if you just go to the mrkwp.com, go to the blog, there's an article published today with just a couple of links in and stuff, and links to my slides as well with my notes. And that's pretty much it. So I wanted to keep it short and sweet. We now got time for questions. I do have a panel here, so apparently the instruction is throw this at people with too hard of questions. Is that right, Joe? Yeah? Okay. So please be gentle with me, or I've been instructed not to be gentle with you. And remember, the only bad question is the one that's never asked. So please ask any questions that you may have.
Yeah,
thank you.
Give a big round.
Okay. All right. Thanks for the wonderful lecture. Okay, I'm gonna ask. I'm a too low-level guy in WordPress, and I just wanted to ask: what is the future of this? Because I think this applies only to Gutenberg. What about the other plugins like page builders? How do they? What are they offering? How do you know? How does this apply there?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Look, and this
build
is
a block like this. Can I load it in other page builders, or they have their own methodology?
Yeah, look, if we look at the rank math example, right, this is the way that I build a lot of things. Bit of history for me, I used to build a lot of custom Divi modules. So they're shortcodes. Remember how I said at the start, hey, Divi's all shortcodes. Now, Elementor as well has different types of output, right? Bricks has another one. The block builder has another one. And within those, you can mix in shortcodes. So quite often when I'm building a commercial plugin, what do? Well, I make my PSR4 setup with my autoloader, everything nice and safe. So I've got a great autoloader. What does that do? It stops me having any namespacing issues with the names of my PHP functions. From there, I actually make sure that anything I'm outputting, I output it as a block, and I also do a shortcode that receives the same attributes. This means that if somebody downloads my commercial plugin and goes, hey, we want to switch to Beaver Builder. No problems. Here's a shortcode. If that doesn't do what you need, let me know, and I can add into my repo a layer that's now a Beaver Builder block. Oh, I'm using Elementor. No problems. Use the shortcodes. You can put the shortcodes in wherever you need them. They receive the same attributes, same name, same everything, but it just doesn't have that block veneer over the top. And that's why I think dynamic blocks, particularly for that circumstance you mentioned, is very good. Because the save feature, the thing that's outputting my HTML, is not in React, it's in PHP. And that can shift around to any of the builders at all. And if you happen to want to know how to make an Elementor module, for example, you could stick that over the top, call your shortcode, boom, there's your Elementor plugin with parity with the two.
Okay, so you still need to adjust it to...
You will still have to adjust it. New Divi though, I'll be dropping a video not next week, the week after. It takes Gutenberg blocks and will output Gutenberg blocks inside Divi natively.
Okay, thank you.
So some do, but not everything.
Good,
Yep.
thanks.
Okay, I hope this question makes sense because I'm still pretty junior with React and PHP, but does it mean that this is client-side rendering or?
Yeah, both.
Both, and how does state management work?
Well, it's all inside the blocks already there. So if you look at those, because I've got the edit.js, the state management is there.
Okay.
So it's already there inside those examples. If you take a look at that WP list category block, as well as some of the other ones, Just take a look at those. If you've got more questions, fire them at me. I'll make YouTube videos for them. I love making YouTube videos and sharing this knowledge. Because sooner or later, when we go deep on these things, you get that aha moment. That aha moment, as we all know as developers, is different for every single one of us. But go and grab these repos, start changing some of the code, and you'll see very quickly what this stuff does. And once you get there, you'll get that aha moment. You're going to go, oh, I get it. Particularly with that rank math one, you'll see how it outputs the actual breadcrumb in the page. And so go give it a go, get in the weeds, spend some time there, and reach out to me. Seriously, I'll do the YouTube videos. It's fine. I like doing them, and I want to make sure people are learning from those. So anything that you struggle with, let me know. I'll make a great little video, and you can learn it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for the talk. Yeah, I'm prepared. One comment, one question. So I think the shortcomings of static blocks just aren't being advertised enough. The fact that we need to write deprecations if we ever want to change the markup is just mind-boggling and frustrating as a developer, because you can't fix accessibility problems.
It's a bit like, here's a stick,
Stuff
would
like
you like
that.
to poke yourself in the eye with it?
Yeah, and converting sites or converting pre-existing blocks from static to dynamic to fix some of those issues is a process as well. So dynamic blocks, invest. The comment though, the question though, sorry, how are you handling the anchor field or the ID field? Because there's currently a bug with Gutenberg and Core where you can't have the ID passed through to the front end properly. It doesn't get saved.
I use an attribute instead.
Yeah. Okay. So you patch in the support until it's fixed properly.
Let me find this thing just a sec. I'll show you.
Yes, just defining it in block JSON, right? Or something else.
I add a data attribute to the tag. So you've got the opening block attribute part, right? Let's just bring up one of these ones that we've got here, and we'll go to there. All right. I feel like I'm on an ATM. All right. So see just here, I've got that PHP, right? And that output, that block attribute wrapper is doing the ID, right?
So on dynamic blocks, the ID doesn't even get saved properly.
No. But what I would do is just say something like, inside this tag right here, there, I would just say data, whatever. Data, ATR equals whatever, like that, and I target that.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's what I've been doing with my SCSS and stuff like that. So, and I always use custom data attributes, and that's a great way to be able to handle any of your HTML stuff within static as well. So what I end up doing is creating these custom data attributes or custom attributes to a HTML tag, and then I shimmy into that, if you will, through SCSS or targeting and things like that to target that attribute instead as part of my CSS query.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, firstly, fabulous talk. Really, clears up some things about how to build blocks a bit more natively rather than relying on like ACF and things like that to bridge the gap. One thing I was wondering is how you handle having inner blocks. So, like say you want to build, an image in a copy block or something like that, and you want to be able to have the existing blocks inside that. How do you handle sort of defining what you can put inside and what you can't, and how do you handle that sort of scenario?
I kind of avoid that. Just again, because it's like, anyone familiar with the term code smells? Yeah, it's like when you're using something and you go, this stinks. I don't know exactly why, but something smells funny.
Yeah, it feels really clunky, and that's a real sort of problem I'm having at the moment, is how to scale things.
Inner blocks for me have been so annoying.
Yeah.
And I've got to the point now where I generally try to avoid using them. Instead, what I do is create layouts and things like that and pre-done patterns, and I use a hook to turn off any patterns that I don't want for the end client. So then what I do is, instead of saying, hey, here's all this real flexible editing stuff, I say, nah, here's a layout, just use this thing and double up on this thing instead. This will work well for you. If you try to do this on your own, you're on your own. Here's a stick. poke yourself in the eye later, and then you can come back to this. Like, you know, because it does get real tricky, that whole inner block thing.
Yeah.
It feels real janky to me.
Yeah.
And I know what you mean, because there's things like, I want to do a carousel slider of logos. Let me put an image inside of an outer block that's like my slider. Let me now repeat my logo images on the inside and make that all slide nicely. And it's just like, there's something just not quite right with the way that's going on. Whether that needs some further improvement in the way it's coded, or whether I'm just stupid and it needs to be communicated better to me, but I don't feel like I've had an aha moment on the inner blocks just yet. So for me, my result right now is avoid it, use repeater fields instead, try to kind of avoid getting involved in any too complex of patterns, because the other thing as well is the ones that I did in the past, I end up finding that the Gutenberg create block thing gets updated, new updates come, and I have to go back and fix it because something weird will happen. And debugging those stuff's been quite challenging. So unfortunately, I don't have a great solution to that right now. Maybe somebody else does though.
Thank you, though.
Yeah, thanks.
I was going to say, just to add to the inner blocks thing, I feel it's more of a philosophical kind of question being asked. As developers, I think you and I are alike, and that we would prefer to build components that clients can't break. And the way that Gutenberg is going is chasing Wix and Squarespace, where you have the utmost freedom to, well, create a train wreck. So it goes back to that philosophical thing of, if you allow all of this functionality, you're enticing the problems. So
Yeah, I think so.
you don't have to go that
and
way.
look, I've got it on my list to do a logo slider, because I think that's an excellent example, or a gallery with light boxes and things, where you could just say, hey, I'm going to have my inner block, let me add all these images. And one of the ones that I thought would be really cool would be to have a gallery where I can set thumbnails and videos as well. So I would say, all right, I want this light box. You know, we've all seen those things where it's like, hey, you know, put 20 images in there, 5 of them are YouTube videos, you know, the other 15 are images. And I want to be able to pop those up. And one of them might even lead to like a form or something, you know what I mean? And I thought it'd be really good to be able to use the inner block pattern for that. But each time I get pretty catastrophically stuck, and I end up just kind of abandoning it. But it's like a lot of people with the front-end editor at the moment. I saw something from, I think it was Mark Wilkinson in the UK, and he was like, I just spent 2 days trying to make a simple footer in the full-site editor with editable links. You know, am I doing something wrong? And it was just coming down to understanding the paradigms. Everyone needs those aha moments. And for him, I think he was just hitting against a limit within the full site editor with something that we take for granted elsewhere. These tools are fluid. They're all going through dynamic change. So just be aware of that. But hey, there's people around. We're on the Slack. You know, there's YouTube videos and things like that. So by all means, reach out.
Yep, one more.
Yeah.
Quick one on the inner blocks first. I love inner blocks. They're great. If you say these are the blocks that are allowed to be in the inner blocks, and then tell that block it can only be inside that block, the inner block.
You can do that.
Great for those sorts of components. So like galleries.
Yeah, it does work, but the problem is like I've got an outer block. Within the inner block, I'm using an image block that I want to use from Gutenberg. I want to put another layer on top of the image block, so I take the image UI that's already there natively, and I want to put stuff on top of that within the inner block. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
Because now I've got a custom block within my other inner block, and that custom block is laid over the top of the existing image block.
I throw all that away and just use custom blocks.
Yeah, and that's why I get to that point where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to bother with that, and that's where I've kind of got stuck. Just saying, hey, here's an outer block, you're allowed to put these things inside of it. That's relatively straightforward. It's when you start to say, I want these specific terms around how this block is inserted within that outer block that we start to hit trouble.
Throw them away, do your own custom block. Question though, have you used meta blocks? And if so, this is probably actually not worth asking this now because you don't like inner blocks. How do you use inner blocks and inside a meta block?
So you're talking
Let me know.
a meta block as in?
Something that saves the post meta.
Oh, right. Yeah, okay. There's actually some good examples online. Who did that tutorial? Oh, I can see his face and everything. Reach out to me. I'll send you a URL. There's a really good example. inside, on my links that I've got, if you go to the WordPress block development stuff to the playground, within the playground, there's some stuff there. So go to my URL, which I've mokwp.com/WC Sydney. Scroll down, there's a link to a Gutenberg repository that is called WordPress development block examples. Within there's a list of playgrounds, and there they've got the dynamic block, interactive blocks, all that kind of stuff. And there's one in there, I'm pretty sure it's the recipe or something like that. If you can't find it, reach out to me, I'll find it and email it to you. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Matt. That was great.
Thank you.